Guys, welcome back to the channel. I've got two rounds here. I have a 6.5 284 with an ELDX bullet and a 6.5 284 with a Nosler Partition bullet. Now go back and watch part 1 and 2 to see how I put these bullets together, the components I used. But basically I used good components and I took out all the variables when I created these loads. So there's nothing different about them except for the bullet and of course the cartridge overall length. Because their ogive is in a different spot, they will have a cartridge overall length. Both of them are 20 thousandths off the lands. They have the same powder, reloader 22, and they have the same amount of that powder, exactly. So there's really nothing different other than the bullet. So we're gonna see how they compare. This is not scientific by any stretch of the imagination, but we're just gonna start out by seeing the velocity. Now, before I shoot these 52.5 grains of reloader 22, I'm going to start with the Partition, and I have a 51.5 grains because I want to build up. I want to shoot that. It's a grain under max, and I want to verify with hopefully there's no signs of pressure, and then I'll go up to 52. I've got one loaded here at 52, and if I still see no signs of pressure, I will then shoot a 3-shot group and check the velocities. So stay tuned. My GoPro died on me. I had 2 batteries that were fully charged, literally made sure they were charged, put the second battery in because I just filmed another video, put the second battery in, it had 8%, died immediately. Piece of crap. So throwing that battery away. Anyway, use my phone here. All right, so I shot the Partition at 51.5 and 52 to make sure there was no signs of pressure. There was not. Shot my 3-shot group of 52.5 grains of reloader 22, which is what the book said was max. The book said I should get around 2940, something like that. So I was just hoping I'd get around 2900. So the velocity I was very impressed with: 3008, 2997, and 3004. That's fantastic. So all really close together. Standard deviation, extreme spread is small. Very happy with those numbers. Plus they're a little bit higher velocity than I thought. However, that is a 26-inch barrel, so that could be the reason why. Here is, it's aiming right here. Now, that was 51.5, that was 52. That was my first 2 shots with 52.5, and I thought, holy cow, this is awesome. And then that was my 3rd shot. So that's a 3-shot group there, which is terrible. However, this is not really about accuracy. This is more about the velocity. Is it going, how is it going to perform? And with those numbers that close together and a standard deviation that small, I am thrilled with that. So, all right, let's shoot the ELDX. All right, shot my 3-shot group of the Nosler Partitions and my 3-shot group of the ELDX. Once again, same powder, same amount of powder. Everything the same except for the bullet. Both 20 thousandths off the lands. I did have a little bit of pressure. One of the 3 Nosler Partition loads had an extractor mark on the primer. One of the 3 ELDX loads had an extractor mark on the primer. one of the ELDX loads, the same one that had the extractor mark, also had a heavy bolt lift. None of the partitions had a heavy bolt lift, so none of the primers were like flattened, they all had rounded edges. So I definitely don't want to go any higher on either load. So many times in my reloading, the max I didn't think was the max. In this case, the max seems like the max. I don't want to go any higher than that. Might even back it down just a slight bit. As far as extreme spread, the Partition definitely had a better extreme spread, and it had higher muzzle velocity, but I kind of figured it would. It's 3 grains lighter. I know that's not much, but it is 3 grains lighter. So the Partitions had a muzzle velocity average of 3,003, and I haven't figured up the standard deviation, but I'll put it on the screen right now. Very low, very low. Also an extreme spread of 11, which is very good. So very happy with that. The ELDX had an average muzzle velocity of 2940, which is good. It's about what I thought. With an extreme spread of, I forgot temporarily the extreme spread. I'll put it on the screen there. Not as good standard deviation, not as good extreme spread. Now let's look at the groups. Once again, this is not about accuracy, but you might as well look at them. So I already showed you the shots from the Partition. Here is the shots from the ELDX. I know that those two were the first two. I think that one was 51.5, that was 52, and that is the last 3. There's 3 shots right there, basically in the same ragged hole. It's not about accuracy, but dang, that was a heck of a group. That's 100 yards. I'm gonna say that's about 3/10 of an inch and I'll measure it later, but very happy with that. Hey guys, I'm filming this in post. I just want to apologize for the camera that you're getting ready to see, the camera shots. My main camera is broken. I dropped it, the lens is busted. I've got a new one coming. My GoPro, which is functioning now because I'm home, and I put a new battery in it, but it ran out of batteries the worst possible time, and so I kind of had to use my cell phone, and I didn't have a tripod, didn't have a way to brace the phone, so this next segment, the camera shots are not good, and it's not good quality, but I'll be back in a minute to share the results. Pieces went flying way over there and there. That one did not get hit. This one has an exit hole right there. Oh, there it is. So cool. Oh. And there is no core. There is no core. Nice. Okay. Okay. I'll have to watch the footage to see which one went flying. But here's how I had it set up. So I had this one right there. I had one there, and then I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deep with these 2 flat ones in the back, 3 on the sides. You saw it knocked over 1 or 2 of those bigger ones. Here, but basically it penetrated through 4. So it went through, and in all honesty, that might have been there. This might have been on the side, I'm not sure. I just know that went flying that way. But it definitely penetrated 1, 2, 3, and this is the 4th one. You can see where it went through, and it honestly didn't penetrate these. It just kind of went in this corner and stopped. But it penetrated 4. So let's get it set up for the Partition. All right, so I got to improvise here. 4 are destroyed. I only have 2 of these. So I've used those bigger ones and I've lined them up 6 deep, and I've put these other jugs on the side. So I know it's not apples to apples, but See if we can catch this bullet. Definitely some devastation. Don't see any bullet in there. Just went flying and split from the impact. Okay. I had 6 of these. There's obviously the first one. So completely demolished. And then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, they're all there. Here's the other one of these. Ooh, it's got a split in it too. Yeah. So it's got a split from being impacted. But I don't think there's a bullet in there. Okay. All right. So here's number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and there it is. Yes, number 5 is in there. So I went through 5 and not 6. All right. So I went through 5 versus 4 with the ELDX. All right, so little tiny piece there, and look at that. Huh. Pretty cool. Hey guys, I'm back at the house. I want to give you some up close shots of the bullets that I shot, and the groups as well, the expansion and the weight retention. Kind of just give you some up close on all that. So be right back. All right, let's test out the weight. So this is the Hornady ELDX. You can see the core is totally gone. A little bit of lead stayed on the jacket. Let's throw it in there. See what its weight is. 47.02. All right. I'll put on the screen right now what weight retention that is. Here is the Nosler Partition. See it there? All right. 93.56. We'll show you the weight retention now. Nosler Partition, you can see there, 0.6 of an inch. 504 here, 569. That is the widest point, basically 0.6 of an inch. 587, 528, 598. This is the widest point on the ELDX, and it is exactly the same as the Partition. All right, so to me, the ELDX looks like it's just sticking out there further, but when you measure, it's basically exactly the same, 0.6 of an inch expansion. Look here at the 2 bullets, the ELDX on the right. Of course, its core is completely gone, which the front half of the Partition's gone too. The Partition performed basically exactly like it's advertised. The front half kind of mushrooms back, a few pieces fell off, all the lead's gone. Where it stopped is right at the Partition. So it did what it was expected to do. Held together pretty good. I think it did a pretty good job. Now, let me just tell you that this ELDX is sharp. Those shreds are sharp. It didn't mushroom quite as nicely as the Partition, but man, there's some sharp edges there. And it expanded the same. It almost penetrated the same, but not quite. Definitely did not have the weight retention. Now, there are some people that will say, in fact, if you look at the box on the Partition, it basically shows lead mushrooming more like what you'd see in a traditional bonded bullet. But that can be possible. There might be times where the lead does stay intact, but I think that's not typical. This to me is the typical bullet. This is what's going to happen. It's going to lose its core. It's a cup and core. It's going to lose its core, and it's not going to retain good weight retention. From my experience in this test, and also just from a lot of just from watching a lot of other people's tests, it's not typical that it will retain its core, though it has before and can at times. This is more typically what you're going to see. If you're wondering, like, from base of the bullet to where it expanded, how much is that? That's 3,485 on the ELDX. Let me check the partition. 50785. All right, here's the ELDX. So let me set this down. This and this was the two holes where it actually, the first two that I was building up pressure went. When I actually shot my 3-shot group, it was literally all the same hole. Now I'm going to set this down, and I'm going to basically, I'm basically going to push that back and just show you what it looks like once you kind of push everything back into place. All right, so there's the paper being pushed back into place. Now that's not really representative, because after the first shot, the paper might have been ripped, and had the paper not been ripped, it might have made a bigger hole. But I'm not kidding you, that is a 3-shot group right here. Okay, this general area. That right there is pretty legit. I'd say maybe slightly bigger. That is a 3-shot group, 0.143. So it's a fantastic 3-shot group at 100 yards. Even if I extended it a little bit, maybe let's say to that, still less than a 1/4 inch group. So I'm gonna say it's like that right there is a 3-shot group. So fantastic. And then here is the partition. So these are the 2 shots with the lower pressure ratings building up to the 3-shot group. And if it was the first 2 was right here. The first 2 was probably around 4/10. Let's see. So yeah, 4/10 of an inch was basically what those first 2 shots were. But unfortunately, that was the 3-shot group, and it was more like 2.3 inches. This is hard to do holding the phone, but anyway, wasn't for that flyer, that was starting to be a pretty good group, but that flyer really messed it up. All right, so you've seen everything. Let me kind of give you just a little bit more information on the velocities. All right, so on the Nosler Partition, 52.5 grains. I shot a 3-shot group, 3008, 2009-97, 3004, which was an average of 3003, pretty darn good. Extreme spread of 11, and a standard deviation of 4.5. So very impressive on that number. Now you saw the group, not the greatest. However, I wasn't shooting for groups today. It was just a bonus if they grouped well. I was just shooting mainly to see what the standard deviation was going to be. So that's fantastic as far as I'm concerned. Hornady ELDX, same powder, same grain weight, 2335, 2953, 2932, average of 2940, with an extreme spread of 21 and a standard deviation of 9. Not terrible at all, pretty darn good. Now I know if anyone's typing in on their keyboard right now that this is a 3-shot group. It's not conclusive. You need more testing, you need more evidence. It's not scientific, but it's what I did. And just an FYI, so I shot the water bottles at 25 yards. Like I said, the camera was terrible. I was using my phone. I was propping it up against something. Didn't even have myself shooting in the picture, but at 25 yards where I was shooting, the ELDX was going about 2904 on the feet per second, and the Partition was going about 29.56, and that's the velocity in which they hit the water jugs. Now, another thing about the water jugs, it's not an apples to apples like you're shooting a deer. It's not the same. It's just a way to basically capture the bullet and see what kind of expansion that you might get. Also, you really should shoot at multiple distances, not just 25 yards, but that's what I did today. All right, so just some ballistics, just in case you're curious. So of course the Partition has a 63 feet per second advantage at the muzzle. So at 100 yards, the ELDX has 2802 on velocity, 2493 on energy. The Partition has 2822 on velocity and 2477 on energy. So at 100 yards, the Partition still has an advantage on velocity, but only 20 feet per second. The ELDX has 16 foot-pounds more of energy at 100 yards. Let's drop down to 300 yards. ELDX has 2520 on the velocity and 2016 on the energy. Partition has 2466 on the velocity and 1891 on the energy. So the ELDX is now going faster by 54 feet per second, and it has 125 foot-pounds more energy at 300 yards. Drop down to 500 yards, the ELDX has 2259 on the velocity and 1620 on the energy. The Partition has 2139 on the velocity and 1422 on the energy. So at 500 yards, the ELDX has increased its muzzle velocity to 120 feet per second and increased its energy to 198 foot-pounds. Now this is because of the higher ballistic coefficient. The Partition has like a 0.490 G1 ballistic coefficient. The ELDX has a 0.625, much higher ballistic coefficient. So it's expected the further out you go, the ELDX is just going to win on energy and velocity. However, the ballistic coefficient doesn't really have much of an impact on wind drift or drop. It is slightly in favor of the ELDX, but from muzzle to 500 yards, it's so little, it's not worth mentioning, and it doesn't really give either one an advantage. Take it out to 1,000 yards, it would be a little bit more significant, but basically the ballistic coefficient advantage the ELDX has is not really going to mean anything with your drop, especially if you know how to calculate it and you have a rangefinder, and it's not going to have enough difference on wind drift to even matter. But the retained velocity and energy will be a definite advantage at 300, 400, 500 yards. All right, I'll try to wrap this up. So who wins? So let me just start out by saying it went pretty much like I thought it was going to go. I thought the Partition would come out of the muzzle a little faster. It did. I did not really know what to expect on the standard deviation and the extreme spread. So the fact that the Partition was twice as good, and I know it's just 3 shots, but it was twice as good. That's a check mark for the Partition. So, because remember, same powder, no difference. So on the standard deviation, it definitely went to the Partition. Definitely the accuracy went to the ELDX, which I also expected, but that's not really part of this test. Now, this had nothing to do with my testing, but I needed a muzzle velocity to get the numbers to give you, but the BC is definitely an advantage for the ELDX. It's just going to retain that energy and that velocity at longer ranges. So what about the penetration? I expected the Partition to penetrate better, and it did. It cleanly went through 4 jugs, but was in the 5th one. The ELDX went through 4, and it did not go into the 5th one, and the fact it was just sitting right there on the ground, right outside the 4th one, tells me it just barely went through. Clearly the Partition easily went into that 5th one. And I know it was not an apples to apples comparison because I had to move the water jugs around, but I think it's clear from this test and other tests that the Partition will penetrate better. I just feel like that these two bullets are not that different from each other. The front half of the bullet is basically just going to blow up, come into pieces. The back half of the partition obviously is going to stay together and it will penetrate. So it's a hybrid bullet. It's made to the front half blow up, cause a lot of damage, lose some of its pieces and parts, cause a lot of hydrostatic shock. The back half is going to penetrate because it's going to stay together. The ELDX does the same thing, but not as good. It's cup and core, and the cup is going to come out. It's going to lose a lot of its weight retention, which is why it doesn't penetrate as well. However, the back half of the ELDX, from my testing and from many other testings on YouTube that I've watched, always seems to hold together pretty stout. The jacket on the back half of the partition is pretty stout, and it will penetrate. I've seen it go through metal, and I've seen it do pretty well. And it, so I expected the partition to penetrate better. It did, so that's another check mark for the partition. However, the ELDX I thought penetrated pretty good, but it will not have the weight retention as the partition. So clearly, the partition has better weight retention, which will always mean it will have better penetration. But I guess the point I'm making is the ELDX penetrates pretty good and probably better than most people think. So I literally compared these two because I feel like they perform similarly, terminally speaking, on their terminal ballistics. So to me, the ELDX obviously has the advantage of BC, and anything beyond 200 yards is just going to start to have a real advantage. It's going to hit the target with more energy and more velocity. That's an advantage. I feel like the accuracy potential of the ELDX is much better. You can tinker with both loads. You can get that partition very accurate. Just mess with the seating depth, do a few things. You can eventually find a node where that partition is extremely accurate. I just feel like it's easier to get the ELDX accurate, and it just has a more inherent accurate potential. So that also goes with that little bit longer shot. You definitely want to be as accurate as possible at all distances, but especially say a 200 to 500 yard shot, with 400 to 500 yards really being the outer limits of what I would consider ethical hunting. If I knew my shot was going to be within 25 to 175, 200 yards, I would probably go with the partition, because the little advantages you get from the BC and the potential accuracy advantage from the ELDX is not going to matter that much. And though I believe the ELDX is much better than people think it is, it's not as consistent as the partition. You know exactly what you're going to get with the partition. And with the ELDX, I think you can feel pretty confident that you're going to get good results, but not extremely confident. The core may stay in, may not stay in. If I knew it was going to be a shorter shot or up to 100, 200 yards, I'd probably pick the partition just for that consistent terminal performance that I don't think you can be completely confident in the ELDX. So if it was me, and it is me, in Missouri, in the kind of areas that I hunt with, most of the time I'm going to pick the partition. But if I thought it was a 3 to say 450, 500 yard shot, and I felt confident that I could make that shot, I would definitely pick the ELDX. So to me, one wins out for close to medium distances. One definitely wins out for medium to long range distances. And that's my real answer, is it depends on the range, Hopefully what you get from this is that the partition is still fantastic in the year 2023, even though it came out 60, 70 years ago. It's still amazing and still viable and still a great hunting bullet today. And the ELDX has got what you knew it had. You knew it had good accuracy, and you knew that it had great ballistic coefficiency, but it probably was better on penetration, expansion than you thought it would be. So, but if you put a gun to my head and you said you have to pick one, I'd probably pick the partition for hunting, and I'd focus more on the ELDX for, say, varmint hunting or long-range target shooting. But I'm really impressed with both bullets. So, love to know what you think. I'd love to know what your pick is between the two, and any experiences that you have. So, is there more testing that I need to do? I can make a part 4 or 5, whatever. I can do more if you want to see that. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and hopefully you have a great day. And until next time, take care.